Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to pick up on a report by the Public Accounts Committee on our post-Brexit border arrangements and the hit to trade we are taking as a result of them. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So another parliamentary committee has reported on the damage we're doing to ourselves with Brexit. And I'm not going to go over every one of their main conclusions because that would take much longer than I aim to get these videos out for. But I'm going to cover about half of them. And I'm going to point out that although this report has only just been published, it was written last year. So it doesn't take into account the realities of customs controls, makes no comment on the failure of the IT systems related to customs or the massive queues because they didn't exist. This is purely talking about the relatively tame first year outside the single market. Their next report might be a little bit spicy. I think that's scheduled for about 6 months' time, I think. But anyway, first conclusion. They note that our new border arrangements haven't yet been tested with normal passenger volumes. And as I say, they're not talking about the recent customs controls here. They are alluding to the fact that the pandemic suppressed the demand for cross-border travel, even last year, as Europe was starting to emerge from the tighter restrictions on travel from 2020, it was still depressed compared to 2019 backwards. The committee cited some concern for not only how our new border regime will cope when that pre-pandemic demand returns, but also for the biometric controls being introduced for non-EU citizens scheduled for later this year. They also said in their report that it is important that the checks that will apply to HGV drivers do not delay throughput of the lorries. Yeah, good luck with that. Because consider what that statement is saying. It's not saying that we need to work out how to cope with the impact of the delays because of the checks on lorry drivers. It's saying that the new checks cannot delay the process of getting lorries through the border. Can't do it. Like there's no way to contemplate an outcome where these biometric checks do delay the throughput of lorries, which already face 2 full days of delays just to get out of Kent at the moment. And this is in the quiet time of post-Christmas winter, which of course the people writing the report wouldn't have known about because it was written before the start of this year. But as I've discussed in the past, it is almost certain that these biometric checks will cause very serious delays for lorries trying to get through the port of Dover. Very serious delays. I mean, any port really, but Dover is where we get the bulk of our freight moving through. So unless someone comes up with something incredibly clever, and I've yet to see any proposals, then the committee are basically saying, if you read between the lines, we're buggered. Their recommendation is that the government come up with a detailed plan to deal with this. They have yet to come up with a single detailed plan to cope with any aspect of Brexit. So I will not hold my breath. The second conclusion is that the new controls have created additional costs for businesses and affected international trade flows. Now, of course, affecting international trade flows could be positive or negative. It could be an increase or a decrease. This is not the increase type of effects that they are talking about. I'll also just remind you again that these new controls that they're reporting on are not the full Brexit controls. Only what was in place in 2021. 2021. It has not yet examined the customs controls, which it now could, but it couldn't at the time. And it has certainly not examined standards controls because we're yet to apply those. The report noted that it is still tricky to disentangle the impact of the pandemic and Brexit on the decline in UK trade. Now, that's both true and not quite true. You could say it, but I think you should add something more to that statement. Like, if you want to know, okay, in terms of our decline in trade, exactly what figure is down to the pandemic and exactly what figure is down to Brexit, well, fair enough, that's not easy. But as comparable economies in Europe, never mind the rest of the world, in Europe, have seen growth in trade, whilst we've seen decline, as noted by this report, in exactly the same period of time, it's clear that the major factor of our decline is Brexit. Because although there would have been an associated negative impact from the pandemic on trade in Germany or France, for example, their overall trade is up. So it was balanced out by other sources of growth. So why else would our trade have declined a net decline at the same time as other major economies in Europe grew when all the other factors are the same. However, the exact figures aside, the report is clear that all Brexit has done is hit more costs onto businesses trading with the EU. They talked of the need to pay what they call intermediaries to help with customs declarations. Customs agents basically, don't know why they don't just say so. Then the fees payable to both the government and the port. The tariffs if goods don't meet rules of origin. They pointed to the government's own figures from the Treasury, which are a couple of years out of date, but they haven't been updated yet, so it's still the latest figures, that complying with the new customs rules alone can cost businesses £15 billion a year. That's just for customs. That's not anything that gets you more business or anything like that. That is just for the same level of business, for no gain. You know, imagine you did a job of work, you had your own business, and you made whatever profit you made. And let's say your incomings were exactly the same, but you had an extra £15 billion worth of outgoings. Obviously a big company here. For no extra business being brought in. So that's just going to hit your profit. And that's just for customs. Doesn't include standards controls. That's for customs. Doesn't include the extra cost of delays due to problems with the paperwork or the biometric passport control still to come or anything else. It doesn't include the cost of losing the advantage of economies of scale. Because if a business has to say to itself, we can no longer produce for the European market because it's not worth it for us to send our goods there. So you have to scale back production, which means due to economies of scale, you may have to charge more for the smaller number of produce you're shifting. Again, more people may not buy it. So that's going to hit your profits as well. Or you absorb the costs of that and it's still hitting your profits. No, this is just the cost of customs controls. £15 billion a year just for customs controls. A figure alone that is greater than our EU membership fee was. The committee's recommendation for this point was for the government to fully cost the additional expense for businesses and identify ways to reduce these costs. Again, we know that's not happening, is it? The government powerfully do not want to come up with an official figure for the cost of Brexit and absolutely do not want to find solutions because the only solutions to trade friction across a border is some level of alignment. That's it. That's their only solution. The amount of friction that exists at a trade border is directly linked to the level of divergence between the two sides of that border. The more you diverge, the more trade friction. The more you align, the less trade friction. It's really that simple. The third point raised was what the government could do to help SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises. Now, these are in the worst position, of course. A large company, they can shift part or all of their operations to the EU to bypass the problems. Several large companies have already done this. There has been a massive amount of investment that would otherwise have gone into this country that has gone to the Netherlands or Ireland or Belgium or wherever. And it comes at a cost of a lot of British jobs and the corresponding tax revenues that would have been raised by those jobs being based in the UK. In fact, one thing the government will definitely not do is carry out an audit of the value of investment lost to the EU as a result of Brexit. That would not make for pleasant reading. I wouldn't at all mind the EU Commission doing such an audit now. But the vast majority of businesses in the UK are SMEs. It's not just that they are numerically superior to large businesses, they are responsible for half the workforce in the UK. There's approximately 32 and a bit million people that form the UK workforce. About 16.5 million derive their incomes from these small and medium businesses. So half of all productive incomes in the UK derive from SMEs. They are incredibly important, but also the most vulnerable. They are the least able to survive the rigours of Brexit. They do not employ people whose job it is to deal with new trading rules, so they can't employ people just to keep up with the new procedures. They are less likely. Basically, they're going to have, most of them just going to have one manager, the owner of the business. That's it. That will be the only manager in most of these companies. And they're already busy with the day-to-day job of running all aspects of the business. In fact, if it's a small company with maybe just one or two employees, that manager may not even be able to manage full-time. They may also be working as well as their employees. And management is where they can fit it in. You know, they will lack the ability to relocate to the Netherlands or Republic of Ireland. The report made clear that even the government were aware that it is challenging for small businesses to learn the customs procedures. You're not kidding. These are businesses that were mostly set up as members of the single market. That meant there were no customs procedures. They created their business when there were no customs procedures. Their recommendation here is simply that the government should identify the issues still facing businesses and provide support. The problem is they must know this is futile. Around the world, small businesses cannot competitively trade across severe trade barriers unless they are selling something with a naturally high profit margin, which they can eat into to cover these trade barriers, or their product is both desirable and unavailable on the other side of that trade barrier, in which case people will just pay the higher prices for it. Other than that, it's just not feasible. The bottom line is that the only thing that will help many of these small businesses is a lowering of the trade barriers. This can only come with alignment. And then a fourth issue, fourth one I'll cover, the last one I'll cover, was that of the need for a cross-governmental digital system to manage our borders when the government has a poor track record in this regard. Now, this was my favourite because it's actually the most tragic. Because this is the thing, that's their words, not mine, poor track record. That's their words. The committee is concerned that our plan to manage our borders, which is supposed to come to fruition in 2025, relies upon the mother of all integrated IT systems when the government has made an arse of even intra-departmental IT systems in its time. Consider that the IT system developed in the Department for Work and Pensions to handle universal credit was a complete shambles, suffered years of catastrophic failures. Same thing with the Department of Justice. You had judges having to cancel hearings because they couldn't access the files. We've seen the complete mess of the IT systems dealing with the new customs controls. Complete failures. In fact, on that point, I have got another video potentially planned, but so many things keep overtaking my schedule, to discuss the latest in that regard. But basically, this Conservative government have introduced a number of new IT systems since they came to power in 2010. I mean, that's fine. It should update. Systems should be modernised. That's fine. Grand. But they've all been badly botched. They have a 100% failure rate. I've not just picked on their few failures and ignored their successes. 100% failure rate. And I don't just mean IT system launches, few teething problems, 6 months later it's all sorted. No. So the idea that they can successfully implement a much larger and way more complex IT system that will need to link up almost every government department, as well as link up with systems of our main trading partners, because for border control you need some linkage with the other side of the border, that to me seems utterly ludicrous. Now, the words in the report are not quite so strong as mine, but they did show a similar level of disbelief that this is going to work out without a detailed plan, because that's what they showed concern at. You don't seem to have a detailed plan for this integrated IT system. And here's the thing, if you don't have a plan for something complex, you're probably not going to achieve the complex thing, really, if we're honest. But those were what I thought were the main points of interest. A report that makes clear that Brexit has introduced a number of challenges, for which there is no plan to solve them, by the way. A lot of extra costs for businesses, for which there is no compensation in the form of enhanced trade anywhere, and that there are no fringe benefits to the process either. In other words, it's all cost and no return. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.